The alarm bells rang through the council building on Nexus Prime. Ambassador Kethrall rushed down the long hallway, his four arms moving quickly as he tried to read the emergency reports on his datapad. Something big was happening, and nobody understood what. The council chamber was full of noise when he arrived. Representatives from 50 different species were all talking at once, their voices mixed together in a mess of different languages and sounds. Some were clicking, others were humming, and a few were making the low growling sounds that meant they were worried. "Order! Order!" shouted Chancellor Vexthy from the center platform. Her purple skin was darker than usual, which always happened when she was stressed. "We need to understand what is happening before we panic." Kethrall found his seat and looked at the big screens around the room. Each screen showed different parts of the galaxy. Red dots were moving across all of them. Thousands and thousands of red dots, all moving in the same direction. "The humans are leaving," said Trade Minister Kolpon. His voice was flat and emotionless, like always. "All of them. From every world, every station, every outpost. They are packing up and going away." The room became quiet. Everyone stared at the screens. The red dots kept moving, showing human ships flying away from their homes across the galaxy. "Are they running from something?" asked General Morketh. His scales were standing up, which meant he was ready to fight. "Is there a threat we don't know about?" "No," said Intelligence Director Southine. She was one of the smart, gray-skinned Altarians who knew everything that happened in the galaxy. "Our sensors show no dangers, no enemy fleets, no natural disasters. The humans are just leaving." Kethrall watched the screens more carefully. The human ships were not running in panic. They moved in perfect lines, like they had planned this. For a long time, each ship was full of cargo. They were taking everything they could carry. "How many are leaving?" asked Chancellor Vexthy. "All of them," Southine said again. "Every human colony, every research station, every trading post, even the ones on our home worlds. They gave proper notice to their landlords and paid all their bills. Then they packed up and left." The room started buzzing with quiet conversations. Kethrall could hear bits and pieces of what others were saying. Some were worried. Others seemed happy. Many were confused. "What about their contracts?" asked Minister Kolpon. "They have trade agreements that last for years. They have jobs in our companies. They have military service commitments." "They are paying all the penalty fees," Southine answered. "Every single contract is being properly ended. Their lawyers sent us a mountain of paperwork this morning. Everything is legal and correct." Kethrall thought about this. Humans were good with paperwork, but this was something else. This was like they had been planning to leave for months, maybe years. They had prepared everything in advance. "Where are they going?" he asked. The room became quiet again. Everyone looked at Southine. She touched her datapad, and the main screen changed. It showed a map of the galaxy with a big empty area at the edge. "Beyond the rim," she said. "Into the dead zone, where nothing lives. Our long-range sensors show a huge fleet gathering there. Maybe 10 million ships, maybe more." General Morketh's scales rattled. 10 million ships? How is that possible? We thought humans only had maybe 2 million ships total." "We were wrong," Southine said simply. "It appears they had many more ships than we knew about. Hidden in asteroid fields on the dark sides of planets in places our sensors don't normally look." Chancellor Vexthy stood up. She looked around the room at all the representatives. "Is this a problem?" she asked. "The humans have always been difficult to manage. They ask too many questions. They change things too fast. They don't follow proper procedures." Several representatives nodded. Kethrall had to admit this was true. Humans were always causing trouble in small ways. They would find new ways to do old jobs. They would suggest changes to laws that had worked fine for centuries. They would trade with species that other people didn't like. "Maybe this is good," said Representative Nethvar from the Banking Guild. "Human businesses were becoming too successful. They were taking market share from established companies. Our members have been complaining." And their research was moving too fast, added Science Director Pectol. "They would publish new discoveries every month. It was hard for our people to keep up. Some of our universities were starting to look outdated." Kethrall thought about the human scientists he knew. Dr. Sarah Chen had solved 3 major problems in the past year that his people had been working on for decades. Dr. Marcus Webb had invented a new type of engine that made ships faster and cheaper to run. There were hundreds of human researchers making breakthrough discoveries all the time. "What about security?" asked General Morketh. "Humans make up 40% of our military contractors. Who will replace them?" "We have plenty of other species. Who can fight?" Chancellor Vexthy said. "The Krellings are very strong. The Vorth have good weapons. We don't need humans for security." But Kethrall remembered the last war with the Draconis hegemony. Human tacticians had won that war by doing things nobody expected. They had used old cargo ships as decoys. They had hidden weapons in asteroids. They had won battles that should have been impossible to win. "What about maintenance?" asked Station Director Gulmeth. "Humans fix a lot of our equipment, the jump gates, the power plants, the life support systems. We can learn to fix these things ourselves," said Chancellor Vexthi. "We built this civilization before humans joined us. We can maintain it without them." The meeting continued for several more hours. They talked about which species would take over human colonies. They discussed how to divide up human trade routes. They made plans for replacing human workers in important jobs. As the day went on, more reports came in. The human evacuation was happening faster than anyone thought possible. Entire cities were being emptied in hours. Space stations that had housed humans for decades were being abandoned in perfect condition, with everything cleaned and organized. "They're being very polite about it," observed Cultural Minister Yithrea. "No complaints, no angry messages, no demands. They're just quietly leaving." Kethrall had to agree. This was very different from how other species acted when they had problems with the Council. Usually there were angry speeches, protests, threats. The humans were leaving like guests who had finished a pleasant visit. As the meeting finally ended, Kethrall walked to the big window that looked out over Nexus Prime. The sky was full of ships, human ships, flying away in perfect formation. They looked almost beautiful, like a school of silver fish swimming through dark water. A young aide came up beside him. "Sir, do you think we made the right choice, letting them go?" Kethrall watched another group of ships disappear into hyperspace. "I think," he said slowly, "that we just solved a problem before it became bigger." The aide nodded and walked away. Kethrall stayed at the window, watching the last few human ships leave the system. He felt relieved. The galaxy would be more peaceful now, more predictable, more stable. He had no idea how wrong he was. 3 months after the humans left, Engineer Yoltan was having a very bad day. He stood in front of the massive Jump Gate 7, staring at the error messages flashing on his screen. The gate was supposed to move ships between star systems in just a few seconds. Instead, it was making weird noises and refusing to work properly. "What is wrong with this thing?" he muttered, pressing buttons that should have fixed the problem. Nothing happened. The gate's energy readings were all wrong. Ships that tried to jump through it came out in the wrong places, sometimes hundreds of miles away from where they should be. Yoltan had been an engineer for 30 years. He knew how to fix almost anything. But this problem was different. The gate worked fine most of the time, but every few hours it would start acting strange. Ships would arrive late or early, or not at all. "Sir?" His assistant, a young Nexari, named Peltosh, came up behind him. "I found something in the old files. Look at this." Peltosh showed him a datapad with maintenance records from last year. The files showed that human engineer Marcus Holland had been making small adjustments to the gate every week. Tiny changes to the power flow, small tweaks to the targeting system, little fixes that seemed unimportant. "He was here every Tuesday," Peltosh said. "For 2 years. Always making these small changes. I thought he was just being too careful." Yoltan looked at the records more carefully. Each adjustment was tiny, but together they formed a pattern. Holland had been slowly fine-tuning the gate to work better than its original design. Now, without his weekly visits, the gate was slowly returning to its old settings. "Can we make the same adjustments?" Yoltan asked. "I tried," Peltosh said sadly. "But I don't understand why he made these changes. The manual doesn't explain what these settings do. And when I tried to copy his work, I made the gate worse. This was happening all over the galaxy. Jump gates, that had worked perfectly for years, were starting to have problems. Some were slow, some were inaccurate. A few had stopped working completely, and all of them had been maintained by human engineers who had left without explaining their work. On the other side of the galaxy, Trade Director Mexalar was having his own problems. He sat in his office on Centauri Station, looking at shipping reports that made no sense. Trade routes that had moved billions of tons of cargo every month were falling apart. "How can this be happening?" he asked his assistant. "These routes have been working for decades." "It's the small shipments, sir," his assistant explained. "The humans were handling all the small cargo runs between systems. Medicine, spare parts, personal packages, things that don't seem important by themselves." Mexalar looked at the data. Each small shipment was worth almost nothing. But together they made the difference between a trade route that worked and one that lost money. The big shipping companies only wanted to carry expensive cargo between major worlds. They ignored the small stuff. "The humans were doing this for almost free," his assistant continued. They had small ships that could carry tiny loads to remote stations. Now those stations can't get supplies. This was causing bigger problems. Mining stations couldn't get replacement parts for their equipment. Research outposts were running out of food. Small colonies were cut off from the rest of the galaxy. The big trade companies said these places weren't worth the cost of regular visits. What about the other species? Mexler asked. Can't the Krellings or the Vorth handle these routes? They tried, sir, but they want to do it their way. The Krellings only fly big ships that carry huge loads. The Vorth only trade with people they like. The humans would deliver anything to anyone, as long as they got paid. Mexler rubbed his head. This was becoming a crisis, but nobody wanted to admit it. The council kept saying that other species could replace the humans, but 3 months later, nothing was working the same way. Meanwhile, on Research Station Omega-7, Dr. Sarah Chen was packing the last of her equipment. She was the final human researcher left in council space, and today was her last day. She had spent 6 months carefully transferring all her research data to the new human colonies beyond the rim. Her Altarian colleague, Dr. Sekvith, watched her pack with sad eyes. I still don't understand why you're leaving, he said. We work well together. Your research is helping millions of people. Dr. Chen smiled politely. I'm not stopping my research. I'm just moving it somewhere else. But you'll be cut off from the rest of the scientific community. How will you share your discoveries? We'll find a way, Dr. Chen said. She sealed the last box of equipment and picked up her personal data pad. Actually, I wanted to give you something before I go. She handed Dr. Sekvith a small storage device. This contains some of my recent work, research notes, experimental data, early results from projects I've been working on. Dr. Sekvith looked at the device with interest. What kind of research? Faster than light communication, zero-point energy extraction, quantum medicine, small projects, really. Dr. Chen picked up her bags. Consider it a goodbye gift. After she left, Dr. Sekvith plugged the device into his computer. His eyes grew wide as he read through the files. Dr. Chen had been working on technologies that were 50 years ahead of anything the council had. And these were just her early notes, not even finished research. He tried to contact her ship, but it had already jumped away. The humans had taken all their advanced research with them, leaving behind only these small hints of what they had been discovering. Back on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Kethral was reading reports that worried him more each day. The galaxy was still working, but it was working worse than before. Everything took longer, cost more, and broke down more often. The jump gates needed constant repairs. Trade routes were failing, research projects were slowing down, military exercises were being canceled because too many support systems weren't working properly. It's nothing major, Chancellor Vexthi told the council. Just growing pains as we adjust to the new situation. We'll solve these problems in time. But Kethral wasn't so sure. He had been watching the sensor readings from the edge of the galaxy. The human fleet was still there, beyond the rim. And they were building something. The energy signatures were getting stronger every day. What are they doing out there? He asked Intelligence Director Salthine during a private meeting. We don't know, she admitted. Our sensors can't reach that far, and they're not answering any communications. But the energy readings suggest massive construction projects. They're building something big. Kethral stared at the star charts. The humans had taken their knowledge, their skills, and their technology to a place where nobody could watch them, and they were free to do whatever they wanted. For the first time since the humans left, Kethral felt a small worry in the back of his mind. What if letting them go had been a mistake? But he pushed the thought away. The council had made its choice. The humans were gone and the galaxy would adjust. It had to. 3 months wasn't very long. Things would get better. They had to. 1 year after the human exodus, General Morketh stood in the war room staring at a battle map that showed nothing but failure. The red and blue markers representing his forces and the Draconis hegemony had barely moved in 3 months. What should have been a quick victory had turned into an endless stalemate. Report, he ordered his aide, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice. Sector 7 remains contested, sir, the aide said quietly. Our forces took the mining station, but lost it again 2 days later. Sector 12 is still blocked by Draconis defensive positions, and the supply convoy to Sector 4 was ambushed again. Morketh's scales darkened. This war should have been over months ago. The Draconis hegemony was smaller and had fewer ships, but somehow they kept winning battles they should have lost. What about our tactical advisors? He asked. The Krelling strategists recommend direct frontal assaults, his aide replied. The Vorth suggests surrounding the enemy and waiting for them to surrender. The Nexari want to negotiate a peace treaty. All terrible ideas. Morketh had seen what happened when they tried frontal assaults against Draconis positions. His ships flew straight into trap after trap. The Draconis commanders seemed to know exactly what they would do next. He remembered the last war, 5 years ago. Human tactical advisor Captain Lisa Rodriguez had solved a similar problem in just 2 weeks. She had used cargo ships disguised as medical vessels to sneak weapons behind enemy lines. She had tricked the enemy into attacking fake bases while the real fleet struck somewhere else. She had won battles with plans that seemed crazy but somehow worked perfectly. "Sir," his aide said carefully, "should we try to contact the humans? Ask for their help?" Morketh's pride wanted to say no. But his duty to his people was more important than his pride. "Have we tried?" "Yes, sir. We sent messages to the human territories beyond the rim. No response. They're not answering anyone." This was happening across the galaxy. Species that had relied on human expertise were finding out how much they had depended on that help. And the humans were completely silent. On the other side of the galaxy, Medical Director Yithkala was facing a crisis of her own. A plague had broken out in the Outer Rim colonies, and it was spreading faster than her teams could contain it. "How many infected?" she asked her assistant as they walked through the medical station. 47,000 confirmed cases, the assistant replied, "and the number doubles every 3 days. We've tried everything we know, but nothing stops it." The disease was attacking multiple species at once, which should have been impossible. Most plagues could only affect one type of biology. But this one seemed to change itself to infect whatever it touched. "What about the research teams?" Yithkala asked. "They're working constantly, but they don't understand how the disease works. It's unlike anything in our medical databases." Yithkala felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. She knew who could have solved this problem. Dr. Maria Santos, the human medical researcher who had worked in the Outer Rim for 15 years. She had dealt with strange diseases before, ones that affected multiple species. She had a gift for seeing patterns that others missed. But Dr. Santos was gone, along with all the other human medical experts. The Outer Rim colonies had been abandoned by most civilized species years ago because they were too dangerous, too remote, too difficult to reach. Only the humans had been willing to work there. "Have we asked other species for help?" Yithkala asked. "The Altarians say it's too risky to send their people to the Outer Rim. The Nexari want to quarantine the entire region and wait for the plague to burn itself out. The Krellings suggest bombing the infected worlds from orbit. All useless suggestions. The Outer Rim colonies had millions of people. They couldn't just be abandoned or destroyed. But without human medical expertise, Yithkala didn't know how to save them. The crisis was getting worse in other ways, too. Space stations across the galaxy were having critical system failures. The quantum stabilizers that kept the huge structures from falling apart were breaking down, and nobody knew how to fix them properly. Chief Engineer Poltek stood in the control room of Titan Station, the largest space station in Council territory. Warning lights flashed all around him as the station's stabilizers fluctuated wildly. "How long until total failure?" he asked his team. "Maybe 6 hours," replied his chief assistant. "Maybe less. The quantum field is becoming unstable. If it collapses completely, the station will tear itself apart." Poltek looked at the technical manuals spread across the table. The stabilizer technology was incredibly complex, designed and built by human engineers over 2 centuries ago. The manuals explained how to do basic maintenance, but they didn't explain how the system actually worked. What about the backup systems? They're failing too. Everything is connected. When one part breaks, it makes the other parts work harder, so they break faster. 3 million people lived on Titan Station. If it was destroyed, it would be the worst disaster in galactic history, and they had no idea how to stop it. "Have we found any human engineers who stayed behind?" Poltek asked desperately. "No, sir. They all left. Even the ones who were married to other species took their families and left." Poltek had never understood why the humans had built their technology in such a complicated way. Other species made simple systems that were easy to understand and repair. Human technology was different. It was more advanced, more efficient, but also much harder to maintain without the right knowledge. Now he was beginning to understand why. Human technology wasn't just complicated by accident. It was designed by people who thought differently, who saw connections that others missed. And without those people, the technology was slowly becoming useless. Meanwhile, Ambassador Ketherall was reading intelligence reports that made him more worried every day. The human territories beyond the rim were no longer quiet. Long-range sensors were detecting massive energy signatures, the launch of huge construction projects, and ship movements on a scale nobody had seen before. "What are they building out there?" he asked Intelligence Director Salthine during their weekly briefing. "We still don't know for certain," she replied. but the energy readings suggest they're building something much larger than anything in Council space. Maybe multiple space stations, maybe shipyards, maybe something completely new. How is that possible? They left with just a few million ships. How can they build so much so quickly? We may have underestimated their industrial capacity, Salthine said carefully. It's possible they were holding back their true capabilities while they lived in our space. Kethral thought about this. Humans had always seemed eager to help with any project, any problem. They had worked on building stations, designing ships, improving technology, but maybe they had been doing much more work than anyone realized. Are they a threat? He asked. Unknown. They haven't made any hostile moves, but their capabilities appear to be growing rapidly. If they wanted to cause problems, they would be very difficult to stop. The meeting ended with more questions than answers. Kethral walked to his office window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere beyond his sight, humanity was building something new, and they were doing it without any oversight, any restrictions, any limits. For the first time, he wondered if the Council had made a terrible mistake. They had thought they were getting rid of a troublesome species. Instead, they might have freed humanity to become something much more powerful. The galaxy was falling apart without human expertise. Trade was failing, technology was breaking, wars were being lost, and plagues were spreading. And somewhere beyond the rim, the humans were building something that might change everything. Kethral had a feeling that the galaxy's problems were just beginning. 2 years after the Exodus, the alarm systems at Nexus Prime Defense Station started screaming. Sensor operator Vec Talon stared at his screens in confusion. According to his instruments, a single ship had just appeared at the edge of the system. But that was impossible. Nothing could get past their early warning networks without being detected much earlier. Contact type unknown, he reported to his supervisor. It just appeared. One moment nothing was there, the next moment there was a ship. Defense Commander Joel Reth hurried over to look at the readings. The ship was small, maybe a light cruiser. It was broadcasting standard peace signals and requesting permission to approach Nexus Prime. Nothing threatening about it, but how had it gotten so close without being detected? Run a full sensor sweep, Jalreth ordered. Check for cloaking devices, stealth technology, anything that could explain this. The sensors found nothing. No trace of how the ship had arrived. No energy signatures that matched any known stealth technology. It was as if the ship had simply materialized out of empty space. Sir, Vectalon said quietly, the ship is transmitting an identification code. It's human. The command center became very quiet. Everyone stared at the main screen showing the unknown vessel. It had been 2 years since anyone had seen a human ship in Council space. Put them on screen, Jalreth ordered. The view screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a human woman in a clean blue uniform. She had short brown hair and calm brown eyes. Behind her, they could see a ship's bridge that looked unlike anything in their databases. This is Captain Maria Santos of the Haven Collective Vessel Pathway, she said with a polite smile. We request permission to dock at Nexus Prime. We have a message for the Galactic Council. Jalreth found his voice. Captain Santos, how did you get past our sensor networks? We had no warning of your approach. We used a new type of travel, Captain Santos replied simply. Much faster than the old jump drives. We're happy to discuss the technology with your scientists if you're interested. A new type of travel. Jalreth felt a cold feeling in his stomach. If humans had developed faster-than-light travel, that was completely undetectable. What else had they created in the past 2 years? Permission granted, he said. Dock at Bay 12. The Council will want to speak with you immediately. An hour later, Captain Santos walked into the Council chamber. She moved with the quiet confidence that Kethral remembered from other humans. But something was different. She seemed more relaxed, like someone who no longer had to worry about impressing anyone. Honored representatives, she said, bowing politely. I bring greetings from the Haven Collective. We wanted to let our former neighbors know that we've completed our new settlements and are ready to resume trade relations. Chancellor Vexthy leaned forward. Haven Collective? What is this organization? It's what we call our new territory, Captain Santos explained. 47 star systems beyond the rim, connected by advanced infrastructure. About 15 billion humans now live there, along with several other species who have joined us. 15 billion. Kethral did quick math in his head. When the humans left Council space, there had been maybe 8 billion of them. How had their population nearly doubled in just 2 years? Other species? Asked Intelligence Director Salthine. Which species? Mostly refugees, Captain Santos said. Species whose home worlds were destroyed, or who were displaced by wars, or who simply wanted a fresh start. We don't ask many questions. If people want to join us and contribute to the community, they're welcome. This was news to everyone in the room. No one had heard about major refugee movements in the past 2 years. But if humans were taking in displaced populations, that could explain the population growth. What kind of trade are you offering? Asked Trade Minister Colpan. Captain Santos smiled. We've developed some new technologies that might interest you. Medical treatments, energy systems, transportation methods. We're willing to trade these innovations for raw materials and cultural exchanges. She activated a small device, and a holographic display appeared above the council table. It showed technical diagrams for technologies that made the representatives gasp. This is a cure for the Rigel plague, she said, pointing to one diagram. The disease that's been spreading through the Outer Rim colonies. Our medical teams developed a treatment 6 months ago. Medical Director Yith Kala stood up quickly. You have a cure? How is that possible? Our best researchers have been working on this for a year with no success. We have different approaches to medical research, Captain Santos said. When our people are free to experiment without bureaucratic restrictions, they tend to find solutions more quickly. She pointed to another diagram. This is a quantum stabilizer repair protocol. It can fix the problems that space stations have been experiencing lately. And this is a new jump gate calibration system that eliminates navigation errors. The room buzzed with excited conversations. These were solutions to problems that had been plaguing the galaxy for months. Problems that had started after the humans left. What do you want in exchange? Asked Chancellor Vexthi suspiciously. Nothing unreasonable, Captain Santos replied. Rare earth minerals, cultural artifacts, access to historical databases. Simple. Trade agreements between equals. Equals? General Morketh's voice was sharp. You represent a small collection of refugee settlements. We represent the oldest and most powerful civilization in the galaxy. Captain Santos looked at him with mild amusement. With respect, General, our small collection of settlements has solved several problems that your powerful civilization couldn't handle. Perhaps size isn't the only measure of capability. Before anyone could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the station. Defense Commander Jolreth's voice came over the communications system. All ships to battle stations. Unknown fleet. Approaching the system. The council members looked at each other in panic. Captain Santos checked a small device on her wrist and frowned slightly. Oh, that's just our escort, she said calmly. I should have mentioned we didn't come alone. The main screen activated, showing the space around Nexus Prime. What they saw made everyone fall silent. Hundreds of ships were materializing out of empty space. Not appearing on sensors first, not jumping in from hyperspace. Just suddenly existing where nothing had been before, the ships were beautiful and strange. They had flowing lines that looked almost organic, but clearly used technology far beyond anything the Council had seen, and they moved with a coordination that suggested computer control beyond anything currently possible. How many ships is that? Whispered Ambassador Kethrall. 500, Captain Santos said, reading her device. A standard escort for diplomatic missions. We like to be prepared for unexpected situations. General Morketh was staring at the tactical display. His own fleet had 12 ships in the system, all top-of-the-line council vessels. They were completely outgunned. Are we under attack? Chancellor Vexthi asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Of course not, Captain Santos said, looking surprised. We're here for peaceful trade negotiations. The escort is just a precaution. There are pirates in this region, you know. She activated her device again, and a new holographic display appeared. This one showed a star map of the galaxy, with new markings that made everyone gasp. This shows the current territory of the Haven. Collective, she explained. As you can see, we've expanded quite a bit in the past 2 years. The map showed human settlements throughout the galaxy's outer regions. Dozens of star systems that had been empty or unexplored now showed signs of major civilization. And connecting them all were lines representing trade routes that used the new faster-than-light technology. Impossible, breathed Intelligence Director Salthine. Our sensors would have detected this expansion. Your sensors are designed to detect old technology, Captain Santos said politely. We've developed new approaches to space travel and construction that don't show up on traditional instruments. She touched the device one more time, and the escort fleet vanished. Not jumped away, not flew off, just disappeared completely. As a gesture of good faith, Captain Santos said, I've sent our escort home. We're here for peaceful negotiations, not intimidation. The council chamber was completely silent. Everyone was trying to process what they had just seen. In 2 years, humanity had somehow become a technological powerhouse that made their own civilization look primitive. We'll send detailed proposals for trade agreements within the next few days, Captain Santos continued. Please take your time to consider them. We understand this is a big change from how things used to be. She walked toward the exit, then paused and turned back. Oh, and one more thing, she said with a small smile. We're planning to make contact with the civilizations in the Andromeda Galaxy next year. If any of your people are interested in joining that expedition, they're welcome to apply. She left the chamber, leaving behind a room full of representatives who were just beginning to understand how much the galaxy had changed. 5 years after humanity left quietly, Ambassador Kethrall stood alone in the council chamber. The great room that had once held representatives from 50 species now had only 12 members present. The others had left one by one to join something better. He looked at the empty seats around him and remembered when this room had been full of important people making important decisions. Now it felt like a museum, a place where old ideas came to die slowly. The Altarian delegation has submitted their formal withdrawal, announced Secretary Polvish, her voice echoing in the mostly empty chamber. They're the third species this month to leave the Council and petition for Haven Collective membership. Chancellor Vexthy, looking much older and more tired than 5 years ago, rubbed her temples. What reason did they give? Same as the others, Polvish replied. Better opportunities for their people, access to advanced technology, protection from the various threats that keep appearing. Kethrall wasn't surprised. The Haven Collective had become everything the Galactic Council used to be, but better. They protected smaller species from pirates and aggressive neighbors. They shared advanced technology freely with their members. They solved problems quickly instead of debating them for months. What about our petition to join them? Asked Trade Minister Kolpan, who was one of the few original council members still present. Still under review, Chancellor Vexthy said quietly. They say we need to demonstrate our commitment to their values before they'll consider our application. The irony was bitter. The Galactic Council, which had once decided which species were worthy of membership, was now begging to join an organization created by the people they had been happy to see leave. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Secretary Polvish checked her console and looked up with surprise. It's from Captain Santos, she said. The Haven Collective is sending another diplomatic mission to Council Space. They want to discuss something called the Andromeda Contact Project. Kethrall felt a familiar mix of curiosity and dread. Every time the humans contacted them, it was to announce something that made their own civilization look smaller and more backward. Put her on screen, Chancellor Vexthy ordered. Captain Santos appeared on the main display, but she wasn't on a ship's bridge this time. Behind her, they could see what looked like a massive space station or possibly an entire artificial world. The architecture was beautiful and completely unlike anything the Council had ever built. Greetings, friends, Captain Santos said with genuine warmth. I hope you're all doing well. I have some exciting news to share. She gestured, and the view changed to show a star map of incredible scope. It showed not just their galaxy, but neighboring galaxies as well. Lines of light connected various points across millions of light years. 6 months ago, our exploration teams made successful contact with 3 advanced civilizations in the Andromeda Galaxy, she explained. We've established diplomatic relations and begun cultural exchanges. The diversity of life and technology out there is amazing. Kethrall stared at the display. Humanity had not only spread throughout their own galaxy, but had somehow developed the technology to travel between galaxies and make contact with entirely new forms of life. The Andromedans are very interested in meeting other species from our galaxy, Captain Santos continued. They've invited representatives from any interested civilizations to participate in a formal first contact ceremony next year. She paused and smiled directly at the camera. We'd like to invite the Galactic Council to send representatives if you're interested. It would be an honor to have you join us for this historic moment. Chancellor Vexthy leaned forward. What would be required of us? Nothing complicated, Captain Santos replied. Just send a small delegation of your best diplomats and scientists. We'll provide transportation and accommodation. The journey takes about 2 weeks using our current ships. 2 weeks to travel between galaxies. Kethrall tried to imagine the technology required for such a journey. Their own fastest ships would take thousands of years to make the same trip. Why are you inviting us? Asked Intelligence Director Salthine, who was also one of the few remaining original members. We weren't exactly supportive when you left. Captain Santos shrugged. That's in the past. We're all citizens of the same galaxy, and this is bigger than our old disagreements. Besides, the Andromedans specifically asked to meet representatives from the traditional galactic powers. After the communication ended, the council members sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Chancellor Vexthy spoke. We have to go, she said. If we refuse this invitation, we'll be completely irrelevant. The humans will represent our entire galaxy to these new civilizations. But if we go, Trade Minister Kolpon pointed, Audia will be admitting that they've surpassed us completely. We'll be the junior partners in our own galaxy. Kethral stood up and walked to the great window that overlooked Nexus Prime. The city below was still busy, still functioning, but it felt different now, like a place that was slowly being left behind by history. He could see human ships in the harbor, not military vessels, but trading ships and passenger transports. They came and went freely, carrying people and goods between the Haven Collective and the few worlds that still remained loyal to the Council. Many of those passengers were his own people, Nexari scientists who wanted to work on cutting-edge research, engineers who were tired of maintaining obsolete technology, young people who wanted opportunities that didn't exist in Council space anymore. We already are the junior partners, he said quietly. The question is whether we want to be junior partners who are included in important events or junior partners who are left out of everything. 3 weeks later, Kethral found himself aboard a Haven Collective ship heading toward Andromeda. The vessel was incredible, more like a flying city than a traditional spacecraft. It had gardens, libraries, entertainment centers, and living quarters that were more comfortable than most planetary hotels. The Council delegation was small, just himself, Chancellor Vexthy, and 2 scientific advisors. They shared the ship with delegations from dozens of other species, including many that Kethral had never heard of before. Where did all these species come from? He asked Captain Martinez, the human officer who was serving as their guide. All over, she replied cheerfully. The galaxy is much more diverse than anyone realized. When we started exploring the outer regions, we found hundreds of civilizations that had never made contact with the Council. Some of them are incredibly advanced, just in different ways. This was another revelation that made Kethral feel small. The Galactic Council had thought they knew everything about their galaxy, but humanity had discovered entire civilizations that had remained hidden for millennia. How many species are part of the Haven Collective now? Chancellor Vexthy asked. About 300, Captain Martinez said casually. Though the number changes every month as new groups join us. We're less concerned with formal membership than with cooperation and mutual aid. 300 species. The Galactic Council at its peak had never had more than 60 members. The journey to Andromeda was comfortable but humbling. Every day brought new evidence of how far humanity had advanced. The ship's technology was centuries beyond anything the Council had. The crew included species that Kethral had never imagined could exist, and the casual way they talked about traveling between galaxies made it clear this was routine for them. When they finally reached the Andromeda galaxy, Kethral saw wonders that he would remember for the rest of his life. Cities built inside, stars. Creatures made of living energy. Civilizations that existed in multiple dimensions at once, and throughout it all, the humans served as friendly translators and guides, helping everyone understand each other. They had somehow become the diplomatic center of an intergalactic community that spanned billions of worlds. At the formal first contact ceremony, Kethral sat with the other Council representatives and watched as Captain Santos gave a speech to assembled beings from 2 entire galaxies. She talked about cooperation, exploration, and the endless possibilities that opened up when different civilizations worked together. 5 years ago, Chancellor Vexthy whispered to him, we thought we were getting rid of a problem species. Kethral nodded. Now they're leading a civilization that spans multiple galaxies. Do you think they planned this? She asked. Do you think they knew what would happen when they left? Kethral thought about the quiet way humanity had departed Council space. No angry speeches, no threats, no demands. Just a polite goodbye and a peaceful exit. I think, he said slowly, they knew what they were capable of when they weren't being held back. After the ceremony, Kethral had a chance to speak privately with Captain Santos. He had to ask the question that had been bothering him for years. Why didn't you fight us? He said. When the Council was making things difficult for your people, why did you just leave quietly? Captain Santos smiled. Because fighting you would have meant staying in your system, playing by your rules. We knew we could do better on our own. But weren't you angry? Didn't you want revenge? Revenge for what? She asked, looking genuinely puzzled. You gave us exactly what we needed. The freedom to build something better. We should probably thank you. As their ship began the journey home, Kethral stood at an observation window looking back.